Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our MSc Counseling Conference. Before we get into today's presentation, first let me introduce myself. My name is Stanley, and today I will be presenting my research dissertation on the lived experience of a traumatic brain injury. During this presentation, I'll be covering two research studies. The first will cover what is a TBI, life after injury, and neurorehabilitation, followed by the research aim in question, methodology, and results. Then we will move on to the second research study and cover the importance of childhood, ACE and BI, research aim and questions, methodology, IPA, and results. Finishing the presentation by discussing what the results have told us and why, and what is next. What is a TBI? Before we look at what a traumatic brain injury is, we will look at the umbrella it falls under, which is acquired brain injury, also known as ABI. It is defined as damage that occurs after birth to the brain. Now, a TBI is defined as physiological disruption to the brain pathology caused by an external force and can either be traumatic or non-traumatic. There are three classifications of a TBI: mild, moderate, and severe, each having a cascade of additional symptoms and long-term effects. Let's move on to life after injury. A series of physical and psychological domains are affected. Within the cognitive domain, difficulty arises in episodic and working memory. Visuospatial processing and attention are also affected. In the social domain, there is difficulty with social communication and behavior. An earlier study observed a multitude of conversations between TBI and orthopedic patients and exhibited that TBI patients were rated less interesting, rewarding, and effortful in conversation. Following on, quality of life is also affected. So what does research say about treatment approach and TBIs? Well, according to Cotazer 2007 case study, it examined the combination of neurorehabilitation and psychotherapy. Since neurorehabilitation encompasses behavioral, cognitive, and holistic approaches, with the application of psychotherapy, it can have an impact on recovery. By integrating the 6 facets of Orlinsky and Howard's generic model of psychotherapy, each of these can aid in the neurorehabilitation of patients who have suffered a TBI. Let me elaborate further on the point of incensured impact, for example, which is highlighted as the importance of emotional expression in therapy. This allows for the individual to reflect on any issues or struggles after TBI, but also being aware of the limitations and barriers of how helpful it can be. Due to cognitive impairments of a TBI, there is a reduction for psychotherapeutic interventions being helpful. Now that we have defined what a TBI is, the effects it has on an individual life after injury, and neurorehabilitation, I will now further explain the presented research. The aim of this research is to investigate the cognitive abilities affected by a brain injury by examining the experiences of those who have suffered a TBI by questioning how do patients who have suffered a TBI perceive the availability of mental health support post-injuries. 3 hypotheses were raised. It is hypothesized a significant proportion of individuals will not have been offered counseling. It is also hypothesized that older adults will report fewer offers of counseling than younger adults following a TBI. The third hypothesis, it is hypothesized that individuals who received counseling will report higher current levels of well-being than those who did not receive counseling. Following onto the methodology, in this stage, 13 UK-based participants between the ages of 23 and 75 were recruited. 9 were females and 4 were males. There are no exclusion criteria pertaining to gender, ethnicity, or nationality, but the inclusion criteria are participants must have suffered an acquired brain injury. 31 surveys were reported for English and 3 for Welsh. 13 were fully completed and submitted in English, while 0 were completed and submitted in Welsh. This study design uses a 2x3 repeated measures with 2 independent variables, age and counseling received, and 3 dependent variables, the well-being scores, responses to offers of counseling, and the perceived or predicted helpfulness of counseling. The measures used was the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, which measures and monitors the well-being of the general population, which is used as an evaluation point for projects and policies to improve mental well-being. And the procedures are as followed. Recruitment was done through the brain injury organizations such as Headway and the Stroke Association, and through social media, Facebook and Twitter. The Qualtrics survey presented requested participants to fill in and provide information about their demographics, information about their TBI or their BI, mental health support, and to fill in questionnaires surrounding well-being and childhood experience. So moving on to results. For hypothesis 1, it was hypothesized that a significant proportion of individuals will not have been offered counseling. So a descriptive analysis was conducted. What is shown here is that within the sample, 30.9% of TBIs were accounted for, while 69.1% were non-TBIs, with the majority of strokes being reported. Since the figures are shown for injuries, only 15.4% reported being offered counseling and 84.6% reported no offers of counseling. Moving on to the second hypothesis, it was hypothesized that older adults will report fewer offers of counseling than younger adults following a TBI. Therefore, a simple linear regression was carried out to test if age significantly predicts if individuals received an offer of counseling. The results of the regression indicated that the model only explained 16.3% of variance and that there was no significance found. It was also found that age did not significantly predict an offer of counseling being received. Moving on to the third and last hypothesis, it was hypothesized that individuals who receive counseling will report higher current levels of well-being than participants who did not receive counseling. Therefore, an independent samples t-test was conducted on well-being scores in participants who accessed counseling. The results were no significant effect was found between these two groups. So now let's move on to our second research study, which looks at childhood and TBIs. Emotional, social, and physical development of a child is important throughout childhood, and as it has a direct effect on their overall development and adult life. Therefore, responsive, nurturing, and stable experiences provide lifelong benefits in both physical and mental health. The basic architecture of the brain is ongoing, and over time, a sturdy or fragile foundation can impact learning, health, and behavior. Other things such as family, socioeconomic standing, environment, and society has an impact on childhood. When negative event is experienced during childhood and has an impact on health and well-being, it is called adverse childhood experience and is categorized into abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. The qualitative study title here aimed to find the interrelationship between ABI and substance use, homelessness, and ACE experiences. Out of 5 master themes, 3 themes were highlighted for the need to consider adverse childhood experiences in those with TBIs. Childhood sexual or physical abuse, bullying, and ACE combined exhibited to significant life events, poor attachment relationships, and increased vulnerability happening in adulthood, which led to an ABI more likely to happen. So by combining the importance of childhood and what affects adverse childhood experience on the effect it has on the future of other variables, this research aimed to investigate negative childhood experiences having an impact on in later life in relation to TBIs by questioning, does negative childhood trauma impact the experience of a BI later on in life? It is hypothesized that participants who report a higher level of childhood trauma will have more reoccurrence of brain injuries, greater impact of the brain injury on day-to-day life, poorer current management of day-to-day life, lower uptake of mental health support, and lower current well-being. The methodology is as followed. In the participant pool, 3 participants were recruited for this sample, and they were all females. There was no exclusion criteria, but the exclusion criteria were that they completed the questionnaire and expressed interest in taking part of the second study. The design of the study was analyzed by using interpretative phenomenological analysis, IPA formatting, with a quantitative aspect looking at the independent variable of childhood experience questionnaire scores and 4 dependent variables: the reported amount of TBIs, impact and management of TBI on day-to-day, and well-being scores. The measures used was the childhood experience questionnaire, which was sourced from the online questionnaire of which emotional wounds do I have, and asked questions in relation to memories and childhood relationships. Following on to procedures, interviews were conducted via Microsoft Teams, and 7 questions were asked to the participants on the following. They were asked about their brain injury, life before their brain injury, any traumatic childhood experiences, life after the brain injuries, challenges, mental health support, and what support is needed. The interviews were transcribed and analyzed in accordance to the interpretative phenomenological analysis IPA formatting, and 6 superordinate themes emerged from the narratives. So the first theme is types of TBIs, and this refers to the different types of brain injuries experienced by each individual. Life before refers to how their life was before acquiring their brain injury. Remembering childhood refers to any remembrance of childhood experience, if any. Readjusting to the life after refers to experience of adapting to their new life after a brain injury. Obstacle course refers to the challenges faced day to day after a brain injury. And aftercare refers to the support needed for those after acquiring a brain injury. Switching over to the quantitative side, a Pearson correlation was conducted to measure the strength of association between 2 variables. In this case, it was the association between childhood experience questionnaire and the reported amount of brain injuries, which was shown to have a negative relationship and no significance. Childhood experience questionnaires and impact of brain injuries day to day. There was a small positive relationship, but no significance was found. Association between childhood experience questionnaires and management of brain injuries day to day was also examined and saw a small positive relationship, but no significance, and also an examined between childhood experience questionnaire and well-being scores. There was a negative relationship found, but no significance as well. So moving on to the discussion, we will look at the results of both studies and what they've told us, why, and what is next. So overall, the aim of the study was to investigate how cognitive abilities are affected by brain injuries by examining the experience of individuals who have suffered a TBI, and if negative childhood trauma impacts on the experience of a brain injury in later life. After conducting a descriptive analysis on the first hypothesis, we found that a proportion of people were not offered counseling. Moving on to the second hypothesis, a linear regression predicted that age does not have an impact on the offer of counseling, therefore we failed to reject the null hypothesis. Moving forward to the third hypothesis, an independent sample t-test was conducted between well-being scores and participants' access to counseling. With those results, we saw that there was no significant effect, and therefore we failed to reject the null hypothesis. Going on to the second study, there were 2 negative relationships seen between childhood questionnaire scores and reported amount of TBI and well-being scores. But 2 small positive relationships were seen between the impact and management of brain injuries on a day-to-day. What this may tell us is the more difficult management and impact of the brain injury has, the more possibility that there has been a negative childhood experienced. So why did we get these results? Or why were these results found? So first, small sample size. As we saw before, our sample size was 13 participants and 3 in the second study. With that, a smaller sample size will give results that are not sufficient enough to detect the difference between groups and turn into a false negative, leading to a type 2 error. Another reason for these results is the fact that there are limited research in this field. I discussed 2 research papers, one on neurorehabilitation and the other on the interrelationship between ABI, substance use, homelessness, and adverse childhood experiences. Both giving a general idea of what have been studied, but not specifically going in depth on reports of mental health support and childhood trauma, so that we can see those differences and what is reported in the general public. Another reason why we got these results is recognizing that the sample have cognitive decline and memory impairment, and it becomes difficult for understanding the questionnaires and the questions, so what the questions must be asking or what the questionnaires overall might be asking. So what is next for a study like mine? So next we'll be accessing a population either through the NHS, the Stroke Association, or Headway. This will give us more data to work with and expand out to the wider population. Also, looking at a control group. Looking back at the research, there wasn't a control group, and I believe that using a control group to see the perception of mental health between traumatic brain injury patients and non-traumatic patients, as well as reports of negative childhood experience between brain injury population and population that does not have a brain injury, can let us know if there is a real effect, and then narrowing it down from there. So I have come to the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comment, please feel free to add them to the comment section below. If you feel like this presentation has benefited you or can benefit anyone else, please like and share. Thank you once again, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.